Full moon, a she-wolf in a blue silk gown running through the forest. Not like a queen. Like prey, 3 gray wolves closing in, white fangs, yellow eyes. Not a drill. Behind them, slower but inevitable, the king himself, carrying a silver sword, still stained from a rebellion 6 years past. His wife is running, and he is hunting. 90 minutes ago, she stood in the great hall. 200 witnesses heard his mouth shape the words that unmade her. She is nothing now, torn silk, bare feet splitting on stone, blood soaking the hem somewhere deep in the forest, her wolf claws at her ribs, begging to fight. She won't, not yet, because if she turns around, he wins. If she shifts, he calls her feral. If she stops, she dies something worse than dead. But the most dangerous thing tonight isn't the fangs behind her. It's the secret neither of them knows. The son declared dead 5 years ago is still breathing. She runs. The forest swallows her whole. Lyanna ran, not gracefully. Not like the Luna she'd been trained to be. Like prey, branches tore at the blue silk gown she'd worn to the harvest moon ceremony 3 hours ago. His hands were shaking, back when she'd still believed tonight would end differently. Back when she'd stood in her chamber, adjusting the gold, threading at her collar, and told herself this year would be the year. Aldrich finally looked at her the way he used to. Stupid, the hem caught on a root, ripped. She didn't behind her 3 wolves, not pack warriors playing games, not a drill. Real teeth, real intent. Their paws hammered the forest floor in rhythm. Closer, always closer, and behind them, slower but inevitable, came Lyanna Stoneheart, her husband, her king, the man who'd stood in the great hall 90 minutes ago and stripped her of everything. Lyanna's bare foot landed wrong on a rock. Pain shot up her ankle. She stumbled, caught herself against an oak, kept moving. Her wolf clawed inside her chest, demanding she shift, demanding she fight. Not yet, because if she shifted now, if she let the wolf take over, she'd turn around. She'd rip into those 3 pursuing warriors with everything she had. And then Aldrich would have the excuse he needed. Luna gone feral. Unfit to rule, dangerous. He'd already taken her title. He wouldn't get her dignity. The trees thinned ahead. Moonlight spilled through the canopy. A clearing. Lyanna burst into the open space and stopped. Nowhere left to run. The 3 wolves emerged from the shadows. Gray-coated, eyes gleaming yellow, lips curled back from fangs that could tear through bone. They didn't shift, didn't speak, just formed a semicircle, cutting off escape. Then Aldrich stepped into the clearing, still human. Still in the formal black and silver he'd worn to announce Seraphine's pregnancy. The torchlight from the distant palace caught the Stoneheart crest embroidered across his chest. A rearing wolf beneath a crescent moon. He carried a silver sword, not ceremonial, battle-worn, the blade that had ended the Greyfang rebellion 6 years ago. Lyanna turned to face him, her lungs burned. Her hair stuck to her face in sweaty tangles. The blue gown hung in tatters, but she stood straight. Aldrich stopped 10 paces away. His eyes weren't yellow, weren't wolf, just dark brown, just tired, which somehow made it worse. Look at me like I'm worth something, just once. Before you do whatever you came here to do. She didn't say it. Instead, if you're going to kill me, do it quickly. Her voice came out steady. Barely, Aldrich's jaw tightened. I'm not here to kill you, then why the sword? Why the hunting party? You ran, you humiliated me. The words cracked through the clearing, sharper than she'd meant. Raw, the 3 wolves shifted their weight. Uncertain. Aldrich didn't flinch. You needed to be escorted back to the palace. Safely. Lyanna laughed, actually laughed. The sound came out wrong. Too high. Too bitter. Safely. Of course. Because nothing says safety like 3 warriors in wolf form and the king with a blade. Aldrich's hand tightened on the sword hilt. Lyanna. Don't! She took a step toward him. Then another. The warriors growled low. Warning. Aldrich raised one hand. They fell silent. Lyanna stopped an arm's length away from her husband. close enough to smell the wine on his breath, the faint scent of Seraphine's perfume clinging to his collar. Her wolf snarled inside her ribcage. Lyanna ignored it. You stood in front of 200 pack members. You announced that I was no longer your Luna, that Seraphine would take my place because she carries what I couldn't give you. Her voice stayed level, controlled years of Luna training. Never let them see you break. You did that in the Great Hall, where I resolved territorial disputes, where I welcomed new pups into the pack, where I spent 6 years building something that mattered. Aldrich's expression didn't change. The pack needs an heir. The pack needed honesty. You could have told me privately. You could have, and would you have accepted it? The question hung between them. Lyanna's throat closed. Because no, she wouldn't have. She'd have fought. Pleaded, reminded him of every promise he'd made. When he'd chosen her from among 30 eligible she-wolves, she'd have degraded herself, which was probably why he'd done it publicly. Harder to beg when 200 witnesses watched. Lyanna stepped back. I want to leave Sterling territory. Aldrich went very still. No, you can't keep me prisoner. I can do whatever is necessary to protect this pack. From what? A barren Luna? I think you already solved that problem. The words tasted like ash. Aldrich's eyes flashed yellow. Just for a second, his wolf pushing close to the surface. Good, let him feel something. Anything. But his voice stayed cold. You will return to the palace. You will be given quarters in the East Wing. You will attend functions as required to maintain stability during the transition. Transition. Is that what we're calling it, Lyanna? How long have you been sleeping with her? Aldrich's mouth flattened into a hard line. That's not. How? Long silence. The wind picked up. Leaves rustled overhead. Finally, 4 months. Lyanna nodded slowly. 4 months. While she'd been organizing the Spring Equity Festival. While she'd mediated the border dispute between the Thornridge and Clearwater families. While she'd sat beside Aldrich at council meetings and smiled and pretended everything was fine, even as he grew more distant every day. 4 months? Did you love me? Ever? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Weak. Pathetic. But she needed to know. Aldrich looked away, toward the trees. The palace lights visible in the distance. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost gentle, which made it so much worse. I chose you because you were strong, intelligent, capable of being the Luna this pack needed. Not love, capability. Lyanna's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forced the tears back. No, she would not cry in front of him. Take me back to the palace then. Her voice sounded hollow, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Aldrich nodded once, sharp, dismissive. He turned toward the 3 wolves, gestured. They shifted back to human form, naked, unashamed warriors. 2 men, 1 woman. All younger than Lyanna, all loyal to Aldrich without question. One of them handed Lyanna a cloak. She wrapped it around herself, grateful for the coverage even as the rough wool scraped against the cuts on her arms. The walk back took 20 minutes. Nobody spoke. Lyanna focused on putting 1 foot in front of the other, on keeping her spine straight, on breathing, just breathing. The Great Hall loomed ahead, still lit. Still full. The harvest moon ceremony hadn't ended. Of course not. Why would Aldrich's announcement stop the celebration? The pack had an heir coming. That was all that mattered. They entered through the side entrance. Servants' corridor, narrow stone passage that smelled like bread and roasted meat from the kitchens. Lyanna had used this route exactly twice in 6 years. Both times to avoid pack members she wasn't ready to face. Now she was being smuggled into her own home like something shameful. A maid waited at the corridor's end. Young, eyes down, take her to the East Wing. 3rd floor, room 14. The maid curtsied. Yes, my lord. She gestured for Lyanna to follow. Lyanna didn't look back at Aldrich. Couldn't, because if she did, she might do something stupid, like beg or shift and go for his throat. Either way, she'd lose what little remained of her dignity. The East Wing sat farthest from the Alpha's chambers, farthest from the council rooms and the Luna's study, and everything Lyanna had built over 6 years. The maid led her up 3 flights of stairs, down a hallway Lyanna had never walked. Room 14 had a bed, a dresser, a small window overlooking the outer wall, not the courtyard with its gardens and fountain, the wall. Gray stone and guard towers. The maid curtsied again and left. The door clicked shut. Lyanna stood in the center of the room, still wearing the torn blue gown, still wrapped in the rough cloak. Her feet ached. Her ankle throbbed where she'd twisted it. She should sit down, tend to her injuries, sleep. Instead, she walked to the window. The moon hung full and bright over Sterling territory, over the forests and villages and borderlands she'd helped protect, over a pack that didn't need her anymore. Lyanna pressed her forehead against the cool glass. And for the first time in 6 years, she stopped trying to be strong. The tears came silently. No sobs, no gasping breaths, just water tracking down her cheeks in steady streams, washing away the last vestiges of hope she'd been clinging to, that Aldrich would change his mind, that the pack would protest, that someone, anyone, would stand up and say this wasn't right. But nobody had, because in the end, wolves cared about one thing: bloodlines, and Lyanna's body had failed to provide what mattered most. She pulled away from the window, wiped her face with the back of her hand. Tomorrow she'd figure out what came next. Tomorrow she'd plan. Tonight she'd allow herself to grieve. For the marriage Kerbobrid, for the that had never what she'd believed, for the position she'd poured her heart into, for the future she'd imagined that would never exist. The moon watched through the window, impassive, eternal, and Lyanna let herself break. 6 years earlier, Lyanna had stood in a different hall, watching Aldrich move through a gathering of 30 eligible she-wolves, all daughters of allied packs, all beautiful, all politically connected. Lyanna had worn silver that night, simple, elegant, not trying to stand out because standing out meant becoming a target. And Lyanna had learned young that targets got destroyed. Her own pack, Ravencrest, small, weak, absorbed by Sterling through a merger treaty when she was 19. Her father had negotiated the terms before his death. Her mother had died in childbirth when Lyanna was 12. She was alone in the world, just another displaced wolf looking for a new pack to call home. Except Aldrich had walked straight toward her, past the daughters of powerful alphas, past the she-wolves in elaborate gowns dripping with jewels. Straight to Lyanna, he'd stopped in front of her. Dark eyes intent, you, one word. No preamble, no courtship ritual, just certainty. Lyanna's breath had caught. Me? You. Will you accept the Luna bond? Her heart had stuttered in her chest. This was Aldrich Stoneheart, Alpha King, ruler of the largest pack in the Northern Territories, and he was choosing her. Why? The question had slipped out before she could stop it. Aldrich's mouth had twitched, almost a smile. Because 30 women in this room want to be Luna, but only you look like you understand what the role actually requires. Not love, even then. But Lyanna had been young, hopeful, certain that attraction could grow into something more. She'd said yes. The bonding ceremony had been 3 weeks later. Formal, traditional, witnessed by every pack within 500 miles. Lyanna had worn white, ivory silk embroidered with silver thread. Aldrich had placed the Luna's circlet on her head himself. And that first year, gods, that year had been everything she'd dreamed. Aldrich had been attentive, present. They'd worked together on pack business. He'd valued her opinions, sought her counsel. They'd shared a bed, not frequently, but often enough. It had felt like building something real. Until year 4, when the whispers started, when Lyanna's monthly bleeding continued month after month despite the healer's interventions. When Elder Thorne began making pointed comments about bloodline continuity, when Aldrich started staying later in council meetings, started riding out on border patrols for days at a time, started sleeping in his study more often than their shared chambers. Lyanna had tried everything: fertility herbs, ritual blessings, altering her diet. Nothing worked. And with each failed month, Aldrich grew more distant, until he stopped trying entirely, until Seraphine arrived, until tonight. The first month after the announcement, Lyanna stayed in room 14. Servants brought meals, left them outside the door. Lyanna ate mechanically, slept in fragments, stared at the gray stone wall outside her window. No one visited. Not the pack members she'd helped oversee shatters, not the Omegas she'd protected from abusive mates, not the pups she'd named and blessed, certainly not Aldrich. She heard his footsteps sometimes. In the hallway outside her door, he'd pause, stand there for 30 seconds, sometimes a minute, then walk away. Never knocked, never spoke, just stood there like a ghost haunting the consequences of his own choices. Lyanna didn't call out to him. What would be the point? He'd made his decision, made it publicly, irrevocably. There was no taking it back now. The only person who knocked on her door was Gareth Ironfang, Aldrich's beta, his second in command since before Lyanna became Luna. She almost didn't open the door, but Gareth had always been kind, professional, fair. He stood in the hallway wearing simple traveling clothes. No formal pack insignia. Lady Lyanna, not Luna, just Lady. The demotion still stung Gareth. Her voice sounded rusty, disused. He held out a leather pack, supplies, gold. Enough to reach the southern border settlements. Lyanna stared at the pack. Why? Because you deserve better than this. Simple, direct, very Gareth. Lyanna took the pack. Heavy. Well stocked. Does Aldrich know? No, and when he finds out? Gareth's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. I'll tell him you overpowered me, stole my supplies. Very undignified for a beta. Lyanna's throat tightened. First kindness she'd received in weeks. Thank you. Gareth nodded once. Started to turn away, then stopped. For what it's worth, you were a good Luna. The pack was better with you. He walked away before she could respond. Lyanna closed the door, looked at the pack in her hands, then at the narrow bed, the single dresser, the window overlooking nothing. She could stay, play the role Aldrich wanted, the discarded Luna who accepted her fate gracefully, attend functions, smile, pretend her heart wasn't shredded, watch Seraphine swell with the child Lyanna couldn't give, watch the pack forget she'd ever mattered, or she could leave, build something new somewhere else, somewhere people didn't whisper about barren wombs and failed Lunas, somewhere she could be more than the woman Lyanna Stoneheart had thrown away. Lyanna started packing. The border settlement of Ashwick sat 2 days' ride east of Stirling Palace, far enough that pack politics felt distant, close enough that Stirling law still technically applied. Mostly, Ashwick attracted wolves who didn't fit, rogues, refugees from broken packs. Traders, nobody asked questions. Lyanna left Stirling Palace 3 hours before dawn, Gareth's pack secured to her saddle, wearing borrowed servants' clothes, hair covered by a plain scarf. Nothing that marked her as former Luna, just another displaced she-wolf looking for a fresh start. The guards at the gate didn't even look at her twice. She was nobody now, forgettable, exactly what she needed to be. The ride east took her through forests she'd helped patrol during her first years as Luna, past villages where she'd mediated disputes and welcomed new pups, past the Thornridge border, where she'd personally negotiated peace after 3 generations of feuding. All of it felt like a lifetime ago, like memories belonging to someone else. By the second day, Lyanna's muscles screamed. She'd forgotten how brutal long-distance riding was. How the saddle rubbed skin raw, how every jolt sent pain shooting up the spine. As Luna, she'd always traveled with cushioned carriages, regular stops, hot meals. Now she had hard leather and dried meat and water from streams, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop, because stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant drowning. Better to keep moving. Better to focus on the physical pain instead of the emotional devastation. She arrived at dawn on the third day, exhausted, filthy, every muscle screaming. The settlement sprawled across a river valley. Wooden buildings, dirt roads, a market square that probably bustled during daylight hours, but stood empty now. Lyanna found an inn. The Copper's Rest, the owner, a grizzled she-wolf with silver streaking her red hair, looked Lyanna up and down, coin up front. No trouble. Lyanna placed 3 gold pieces on the counter, more than enough for a month's lodging. The owner's eyes narrowed. Running from something? Someone. Act trouble? Does it matter? The owner considered. Then pocketed the gold. Room 6. Second floor. Meals included if you help in the kitchen during rushes. Deal. Lyanna climbed the narrow stairs, found room 6, smaller than room 14 at the palace, but somehow less suffocating. Maybe because she'd chosen to be here. Maybe because the window overlooked actual life instead of stone walls. She collapsed onto the bed and slept for 14 hours straight. The first week, Lyanna barely left the room. She slept, ate the meals the innkeeper left outside her door, stared at the ceiling. Her body recovered from the journey. Her mind stayed fractured, because without Luna duties, without pack responsibilities, Lyanna didn't know who she was. Her entire adult life had revolved around being Aldrich's mate. Sterling's Luna, now she was just nothing. 28 years old. No pack, no purpose. Barren. The word echoed in her head. Healer Maris had never said it directly. Too polite. But after 5 years of failed pregnancies, the implication hung heavy. Something wrong with Lyanna's body. Something broken. Not Aldrich's fault. Never Aldrich, just her failure. Lyanna rolled onto her back, stared at the water-stained ceiling. Her wolf paced restlessly inside her chest. Get up. Move. Hunt. Something. But what was the point? Hunting wouldn't fix her womb, wouldn't bring back her title, wouldn't make Aldrich love her. A knock interrupted her spiral. Lyanna ignored it. The knock came again. Sharper. I know you're in there. Can smell you, female voice. Unfamiliar. Lyanna sat up slowly. I'm not receiving visitors. Wasn't asking permission. The door opened. Lyanna tensed, ready to shift if needed. But the she-wolf who entered wasn't attacking. Red hair pulled back in a braid, rough traveling clothes, scarred hands. The innkeeper. She set a tray on the dresser. Bread, cheese, dried meat. You've been holed up for a week. Starting to smell, Lyanna blinked. Excuse me? Depression has a scent. Sour. Like old grief. The she-wolf crossed her arms. So, broken heart? Broken pack? Both? Lyanna's jaw tightened. That's none of your, I run this inn. Your misery is affecting business. Customers can smell the sadness wafting down from your room. Was she serious? The she-wolf's expression didn't crack. Apparently, yes. Lyanna stood, drew herself up to full Luna height. Except she wasn't Luna anymore. Just a discarded she-wolf in a border settlement inn. Her shoulders sagged. I'll leave tomorrow. Didn't say you had to leave. Said you had to stop wallowing. The she-wolf jerked her head toward the window. Market opens in an hour. Go buy something. Talk to someone. Act like you're alive. I don't. Wasn't a suggestion. The innkeeper left. Lyanna stood in the empty room. Then, because she genuinely had nothing else to do, she washed her face, changed into clean clothes from her pack, braided her hair, and went downstairs. The morning air hit her like a slap, cold, clear, smelling of wood smoke and distant pine. Alive. Lyanna had forgotten what alive felt like. She walked toward the market square slowly, taking in details, the way sunlight hit the wooden buildings, the sound of a blacksmith's hammer ringing in the distance. Children's laughter from somewhere unseen. Life continuing, the world moving forward, whether she was ready or not. Ashwick's market sprawled across the central square. Vendors hawked everything from fresh-killed deer to poorly tanned leather to questionable healing herbs. Lyanna wandered between stalls. Nobody recognized her. Nobody stared. In Sterling territory, she'd never been able to walk through a market without wolves stopping her, asking for help, seeking favor. Here, she was nobody. It should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt hollow. Lyanna stopped at a fabric stall, ran her fingers over a bolt of blue silk, the same shade as the gown she'd worn the night Aldrich. She jerked her hand back. Beautiful, isn't it? The vendor, an older Omega with kind eyes, smiled, came in from the eastern trade routes. Rare color, would look lovely on you. Lyanna shook her head. I'm just looking, of course. But if you change your mind. 3 male wolves rounded the corner. Lyanna's instincts screamed. Wrong scent. Rogue. She took a step back. One of the males grinned. Well, look at this. Not pack wolves. Not Sterling. Not any organized territory. Freelancers. The dangerous kind. Lyanna's hand dropped to her side. No weapon. Stupid. She'd gotten soft. 6 years as Luna, surrounded by guards. Now she was alone. The lead male stepped closer. Pretty thing. What's a she-wolf like you doing alone in Ashwick? Lyanna kept her voice level. Passing through, is that right? He looked at his companions. Think we should help her along? They laughed. Lyanna's wolf surged. Her vision tinged yellow. Claws threatened to extend. No, not here. Not in the middle of the market. She'd draw attention. Questions worse. She'd lose control. Lyanna took another step back. Measured. Careful, the males followed, herding her toward the alley between stalls. Her heart hammered. This was how it ended. Discarded Luna devoured by rogues in a border market. Poetic. The lead male reached for her arm. A hand caught his wrist. Larger, stronger. Unyielding, she said, passing through. The voice came from behind the males. Deep. Calm. Absolutely certain. Lyanna looked past the rogues. A wolf stood in the alley mouth. Tall, broad shoulders, dark travel cloak, face shadowed, but his eyes caught the light. Gray. Storm cloud gray. And completely unafraid, the lead rogue tried to yank his wrist free. Failed. The stranger's grip didn't budge. You want to reconsider? It wasn't a question. The rogue bared his teeth. She's none of your. The stranger moved. Fast. Precise. Brutal. 3 seconds. Maybe 4, led rogue on the ground, wrist bent at an angle that made Lyanna wince. The other 2 backed up. Hands raised. Easy. We were just leaving. The word cut through the market noise. The rogues left fast. Lyanna stood very still. The stranger released the lead rogue's wrist, stepped back, looked at Lyanna, up close. She could see more details. Scars along his jawline, calloused hands. The build of a wolf who'd spent his life fighting. Rogue Alpha, the scent markers, were subtle but present. No pack, no territory, no rules. Dangerous. You hurt? His voice was gentler than she'd expected. Lyanna shook her head. Good. He turned to walk away. Wait. The word came out before she could stop it. The stranger paused. Lyanna's mind raced. I didn't need help. One eyebrow rose. That right? I had it handled. 3 rogues. 1 she-wolf. Tight space. Limited exit. He tilted his head. You had it handled? Lyanna's cheeks burned. Because no, she absolutely hadn't. But admitting that meant admitting she was weak. Vulnerable. Everything a Luna. Former Luna. Right. Thank you. The words tasted strange. How long since she'd thanked anyone? The stranger nodded once. Watch yourself. Ashwick isn't kind to lone wolves. He walked away. Lyanna watched him disappear into the market crowd. Noticed 3 things first. He moved like a fighter. Every step calculated, every angle covered. Second, no pack scent, which meant he'd been rogue for years, long enough for the territorial markers to fade. Third, He'd helped her without asking for anything in return. Wolves didn't do that. Not in Lyanna's experience. There was always a price. The letter arrived 6 days later, delivered by a nervous Omega who practically threw the sealed envelope at Lyanna and fled. Official sterling seal. Heavy paper. Lyanna stared at it for 10 minutes, then broke the seal. The handwriting wasn't Aldrich's, shakier. Older, Lady Lyanna. I write this knowing you may burn it unread. I would deserve that. But if you are reading these words, please understand, what I am about to tell you will shatter everything you know. 5 years ago, you were told your children died. Both of them. Complications during birth. That was a lie. Lyanna stopped breathing. The letter continued. One child did die. Your daughter. I am sorry beyond words for that loss. But your son lived. His name is Rylan. He is 5 years old. He lives with a foster family here in Ashwick, 2 streets from the market square. Elder Thorne ordered me to hide the birth. Said the bloodline purity protocols required it. Said it was for the pack's stability. I was weak. I was afraid. Took his gold and I lied to you. I cannot undo what I did. But I can give you the truth now. Rylan is yours. He is healthy, strong. He has your eyes. I am so sorry. Healer Maris. The letter slipped from Lyanna's fingers, landed on the floor. She sat on the bed, hands shaking, mind blank, then racing, then splintering. 5 years. 5 years she'd mourned 2 dead children. 5 years she'd believed her body had failed. 5 years of shame and whispers and Aldrich's growing distance. All because Elder Thorne had ordered her son hidden. And Maris had obeyed. Lyanna's wolf exploded inside her chest. Fairy, rage, anguish. Her vision went yellow. Claws extended. Fangs dropped. She wanted to shift. Wanted to tear through Ashwick until she found Thorne and ripped out his throat. Wanted to make Aldrich pay for every lie. Every cold dismissal. Every moment he'd made her feel worthless. But underneath the rage, something else. Hope small, fragile, terrifying. Because if Rylan was alive, if her son was alive, then she wasn't barren, wasn't broken, and everything Aldrich had done was based on a lie. Lyanna stood, walked to the door, yanked it open. The innkeeper stood in the hallway, probably drawn by the scent of Lyanna's distress. Where's the market? Which streets? The innkeeper's eyes widened. Are you? Which streets? The she-wolf rattled off directions. Lyanna didn't wait for more. She ran through the inn's common room, out into the street, toward the northern quarter, past startled vendors. Around children playing in the road, her heart hammered. Her breath came in gasps. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop, because her son was alive. 2 streets from the market square, waiting. The house sat at the edge of Ashwick's northern quarter. Stone walls, thatched roof, garden with ash trees. Ordinary, except Lyanna's son lived there. She stopped at the wooden fence, hands gripping the rough posts. Heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. 5 years. He'd been alive for 5 years while she'd mourned him. While she'd let Aldrich's coldness hollow her out. While she'd believed her body was the problem. The front door opened. A woman stepped out. Middle-aged, kind face, apron dusted with flour, foster mother. The woman saw Lyanna, froze, then called back into the house. Rylan, sweetheart, stay inside for a moment, a child's voice answered, too far away for Lyanna to hear the words. But the sound pierced straight through her chest, her pup, her son. The woman walked to the fence, stopped 3 feet away. You're her, not a question. Lyanna's throat closed. She managed a nod. The woman's expression softened. Maris sent word you might come. I'm Alara. I've been caring for him since he was 3 months old. Nearly 5 years. This stranger had raised Lyanna's child for nearly 5 years, while Lyanna had bled every month and hated her own body. Lyanna's claws pricked against her palms. I want to see him, of course. But perhaps, now the word came out harder than intended. Alara didn't flinch. just studied Lyanna with the calm assessment of someone who'd dealt with protective she-wolves before. He doesn't know about you. Maris thought it kinder to wait until you were found. Until. Not if. Until. Like Maris had always believed Lyanna would come eventually. Lyanna forced her claws to retract. What does he know? That his birth mother couldn't keep him safe. That she loved him very much. That someday, the stars aligned, she might return. Lyanna's vision blurred. She blinked hard. Refused the tears. Later. She could break later. Right now, she needed to see him. Alara seemed to understand. She turned toward the house. Gestured. Lyanna followed on trembling legs. Through the gate. Up the stone path. Past beds of late autumn herbs. The door stood open. Inside, a small figure crouched by the hearth, building something with wooden blocks, dark hair, thin shoulders, bare feet, 5 years old. Lyanna stopped in the doorway, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because the child turned his head and looked at her with eyes the exact shade of sea glass. Her eyes, her mother's eyes, passed down through 3 generations of Stoneheart Lunas. Rylan blinked, tilted his head. Are you her? The question came out so simply. Like he'd been expecting this moment, Lyanna's knees went weak. She grabbed the doorframe, held herself upright through sheer will. Who? Her voice cracked. Rylan stood, brushed dust from his pants. The lady healer Maris said would come. She said you were important. Every word felt like a knife between Lyanna's ribs. Important. She'd abandoned him, let strangers raise him, believed he was dead, because she'd been too broken to question the lie. What kind of important was that? But she managed to step inside, managed to lower herself to her knees so they were eye level. I am very important to you. Rylan studied her face, serious. Assessing so much like Aldrich in that moment it hurt then. She said you were my mama. The word shattered something in Lyanna's chest. Mama. She'd never heard him say it, had never thought she would. Lyanna reached out. Slow, careful. Offering her hand palm up, Rylan looked at it. At her. Back at the hand, then placed his small fingers against hers. His skin was warm, slightly sticky from whatever he'd been eating earlier. Perfect. Lyanna's tears came then. Silent. Unstoppable. Rylan's brow furrowed. Why are you sad? I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm happy. So happy, which was true and also a lie, because underneath the joy, rage still burned at Thorn. At Maris, at Aldrich for creating a pack where children could be stolen, and Lunas could be discarded, and power mattered more than truth. But right now, in this moment, with her son's hand in hers, Lyanna let herself feel only the good things. Behind her, Alara cleared her throat gently. I'll give you time. There's tea in the kitchen if you want it. She disappeared into another room. Lyanna and Rylan sat together by the hearth. He showed her his block tower, explained the architectural integrity in the way only a 5-year-old could. Completely serious about the placement of each piece, Lyanna listened to every word, memorized his voice, his expressions, the way he chewed his bottom lip when concentrating, all the moments she'd missed, all the moments she'd get back, because she wasn't leaving him. Not again, not ever. The gray-eyed rogue found her 3 hours later. Lyanna sat on Alara's front step, watching Rylan play with a wooden horse in the garden. She heard footsteps, caught the unfamiliar scent, looked up. The rogue from the market stood at the gate. Lyanna tensed, hand dropping to her side where a knife should be, still unarmed, still foolish. The rogue raised both hands, placating, easy. Not here for trouble. Then why are you here? He nodded toward Rylan. Heard you found what you were looking for. Word traveled fast in Ashwick, apparently. Lyanna stood, positioned herself between the rogue and her son. The rogue's mouth twitched, almost a smile, protective. Good. You didn't answer my question. Name's Kale. I keep an eye on things in Ashwick. Make sure the wrong elements don't settle in your rogue and your former pack. We've both got complicated histories. Fair point. Lyanna studied him more carefully. Scars suggested decades of fighting. But his stance wasn't aggressive, and he'd helped her in the market. Still, what do you want? Cale leaned against the fence post. Casual. But his eyes tracked every movement in the street beyond. Constant vigilance, Lyanna recognized it. She'd lived that way for weeks after leaving Sterling territory. Maris sent word to a few of us. Said, "You might need watching. I can watch myself. Can you?" The question held no judgment, just honest assessment. And Lyanna couldn't answer, because no. She'd been soft for 6 years. Protected by pack walls and guards and the title of Luna, now she was alone with a 5-year-old in a border settlement where rogues prowled and Sterling law barely reached. Cale seemed to read the admission in her silence. Thought so. I'll be around. You need help, find me at the Copper's Rest most evenings. He pushed off the fence. Started to turn away. Wait. Cale paused. Lyanna's pride warred with pragmatism. Pragmatism won. Why help me? You don't know me. Cale looked at her fully then. Something shifted in his expression. Softened. I know what it's like to lose everything. I know what it's like to find one thing worth protecting and have the whole world try to take it. He glanced at Rylan. Back at Lyanna, you found your pup. That's worth protecting. Then he walked away, left Lyanna standing on the step, wondering what this rogue alpha had lost, and why he cared about a stranger's fight. Rylan ran up to her, tugged on her sleeve. Mama, who was that man? Mama. The word still made her chest ache. In the best way. A friend, I think. He looked scary. Lyanna smiled. Ruffled Rylan's hair. Sometimes the scary-looking ones are the safest. Rylan considered this seriously. Like dragons? Exactly like dragons. He seemed satisfied with this answer. Ran back to his wooden horse. Lyanna watched him play. And for the first time in 6 weeks, felt something like peace. It wouldn't last. She knew that. Eventually, Aldrich would find out about Rylan. Eventually, pack politics would intrude. Eventually, she'd have to make impossible choices. But for right now, in this moment, with her son alive and playing in the garden and a rogue alpha offering unexpected protection, this was enough. This was everything. Meanwhile, 200 miles west, Gareth Ironfang stood in Aldrich's study with a folder 3 inches thick. Aldrich sat behind his desk. Dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight. 6 weeks since Lyanna left. 6 weeks of Seraphine settling into the Luna quarters, redecorating, dismissing staff, making herself indispensable. 6 weeks of Aldrich telling himself he'd done the right thing. But the pack felt wrong. Border disputes that Lyanna would have resolved in an afternoon stretched into week-long feuds. Omega complaints piled up unanswered. The kitchens ran inefficiently. Small things, except they added up, and Elder Thorn walked through the palace like he owned it. Which maybe he did now. Gath dropped the folder on Aldrich's desk. The birth records from 5 years ago. You asked me to review them. Aldrich looked at the folder. Didn't touch it. And? Gareth's expression stayed carefully neutral. Years of beta training. Never show what you're thinking. But his voice held an edge. They don't match. Aldrich went still. What doesn't match? The healer's logs. The attendant reports. The official death certificates. Gareth opened the folder. Pointed to specific pages. Healer Maris was recorded as attending the birth. But her personal log has a 6-hour gap the night Lyanna went into labor. People forget to record things. Not healers. Not during complicated births. Aldrich's hand tightened on the desk edge. Gareth continued. The death certificates bear Elder Thorn's seal. Not the royal physician's. Why would Thorn be certifying infant deaths? He's head of the council. Maybe he was. And there's a payment. 10,000 gold pieces. Transferred from a council discretionary fund to an account in Ashwick. 3 days after the birth, silence filled the study. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Aldrich stood slowly, walked to the window, stared out at Sterling territory, at the forests and villages and packlands he'd sworn to protect. "What are you telling me, Gareth?" His voice came out flat. Gareth chose his words carefully. "I'm telling you the records are incomplete in a way that doesn't happen by accident. I'm telling you Elder Thorne's involvement is unusual. I'm telling you there's money I can't account for. What are you not telling me?" Gareth met Aldrich's eyes in the window's reflection. "I'm not telling you what it means. But I think you need to find out." Aldrich turned, looked at his beta, his friend, the one wolf in this entire palace he trusted completely. "Where is Healer Maris now?" "Her cottage, east of here." 2 days' ride, Aldrich nodded once. "Prepare horses. We leave at dawn, my lord. If Elder Thorne discovers, he won't. This stays between us." Gareth inclined his head, started toward the door, then stopped. Aldrich, using his name, not his title, which meant what came next was personal. "If what I suspect is true, this will change everything." Aldrich's jaw tightened. "Then it changes." They reached Maris's cottage 36 hours later, plived the horses hard. Slept in shifts. Aldrich hadn't slept well in 6 weeks anyway. The cottage sat in a clearing. Herb garden out front, smoke rising from the chimney, peaceful. Except Aldrich's instincts screamed. They dismounted. Aldrich approached the door, knocked silence. He knocked again. The door opened. Maris stood there, older than Aldrich remembered. Grayer, but her eyes widened when she saw him. Then she stepped back. "My lord." Her voice shook, not with respect, with fear. Aldrich's wolf stirred. "We need to talk." Maris glanced past him, saw Gareth, looked back at Aldrich, then nodded. "I've been expecting you, or someone like you." She led them inside. The cottage smelled like dried sage and old guilt. Maris gestured to a table, didn't offer tea, didn't pretend this was a social visit, just sat down, folded her hands, and started talking. 5 years ago, Lady Lyanna went into labor early. 7th month. Twins. Aldrich's heart stopped. Twins. One was stillborn, a girl, small, perfect. But she never drew breath. Maris's voice cracked. She swallowed, continued. The boy was alive, breathing, strong. I cleaned him, wrapped him, was preparing to present him to Lady Lyanna. Then Elder Thorne arrived. Aldrich's claws extended, dug into the wooden table. Maris didn't flinch. He said the bloodline purity protocols required the boy be removed. That political alliances were at stake. That Lady Lyanna's child couldn't be recognized as heir, on whose authority. Aldrich's voice came out rough, barely controlled. Maris looked at him directly. "Your father's." The protocols were established 30 years ago. Elder Thorne had the documentation, the council seals, everything. His father, the great Alpha Victor Stoneheart, who'd ruled with an iron fist and died when Aldrich was 25, who'd left instructions about bloodlines and purity, and maintaining power that Aldrich had never fully read, because he'd thought he knew better, thought he'd lead differently. Maris continued. "Thorne said the boy would be placed safely, cared for, just not recognized. Not declared heir. I told Lady Lyanna both children died. She was sedated, in shock. She believed me." Tears ran down Maris's face now. "I took Thorne's gold. I placed the boy with a family in Ashwick. I kept silent." Aldrich stood paced to the window. His reflection stared back, haggard, hollow, a stranger. "Where is he?" His voice barely whispered. Maris's breath hitched. "Ashwick, northern quarter. A woman named Elara has been fostering him." "And Lyanna?" Silence stretched. "Then she found him 3 days ago. I sent her a letter. Couldn't live with the lie anymore." Aldrich's world tilted. Lyanna knew. Lyanna had found their son. And Aldrich had called her barren, had replaced her, had humiliated her in front of the entire pack, for a child that existed, that had always existed. Gareth's voice cut through the haze. "My lord, we should. Ready the horses. Aldrich turned from the window, met Maris's eyes. "You will testify before the council. Everything you just told me." Maris nodded. Broken, defeated but willing, Aldrich walked out, mounted his horse, and rode toward Ashwick, toward the son he'd never known, toward the mate he'd destroyed. Lyanna was teaching Rylan to skip stones across the river when Chaol appeared, moving fast, battle-ready. She pushed Rylan behind her. Immediately, "What's wrong?" Chaol's eyes scanned the tree line. Riders, 4 of them, coming from the west. Sterling colors. Lyanna's blood went cold. How far? 20 minutes. Maybe less. Aldrich. It had to be. Maris must have confessed. Or Aldrich had figured it out somehow. Either way, he was coming. And Lyanna wasn't ready. Wasn't ready to face him. To explain. To watch him try to take Rylan, because he would try. She knew Aldrich. He'd see the child as his heir. His bloodline. His right. Everything Lyanna had built in 3 days would shatter. Can we run? The question tasted like ash. Chaol shook his head. Not with a pup. They'd catch you before nightfall. Then what? We make a stand. Lyanna looked at Rylan, clutching his handful of river stones. Eyes wide but not yet afraid. Because he trusted her, believed she'd keep him safe. Except how could she protect him from an alpha king? From her own mate. Chaol touched her shoulder. "You're not alone. I've got 3 others who owe me favors. We can hold them off long enough for you to get Rylan somewhere secure. And if they order you to stand down?" Sterling law doesn't mean much to rogues. He flashed a grin, sharp, predatory, the grin of a wolf who'd survived alone for years. Lyanna wanted to refuse. Wanted to say she could handle this herself. But pride wouldn't protect her son. "Do it," Chaol nodded. Disappeared into the trees. Lyanna turned to Rylan. "We need to go back to Alara's house now." "Why?" His voice held curiosity. Not fear yet. Lyanna crouched down, took his small face in her hands. "Because some people are coming who might try to take you away from me. And I won't let that happen. Do you understand?" Rylan's expression shifted, became serious, determined. "I don't want to leave you, Mama." The word still broke her, still healed her. "Both at once. You won't, I promise." She hoped it wasn't a lie. Aldrich saw the smoke from Ashwick's chimneys before he saw the town itself. Late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the valley. Peaceful, except his heart hammered like he was riding into battle. Because in a way he was, just not the kind he'd trained for. Gareth rode beside him, the 2 guards flanking. They'd pushed hard. Stopped only when the horses demanded it. Aldrich needed to reach Ashwick before Lyanna disappeared again. Before she took their son somewhere he'd never find them. Before he lost what he'd only just discovered he had. They entered the settlement. Drew stairs. 4 armed wolves in sterling colors weren't common in Ashwick. Aldrich scanned the buildings, the streets, looking for what? A woman he'd broken 6 weeks ago? A child he'd never met? Absolution he didn't deserve. A figure stepped out from an alley ahead, tall, scarred, gray eyes. Rogue alpha scent unmistakable. The rogue didn't draw a weapon, just stood there bereaking the road. Aldrich reined in his horse. The guards' hands dropped to their swords. Gareth's voice came low. "Careful, my lord." Aldrich ignored him, studied the rogue. "You're blocking my path." The rogue's expression didn't shift. "Ashwick is a free settlement. Sterling law doesn't run strong here. I'm not here on pack business." "Then state your business." Aldrich's jaw tightened. Who is this wolf to demand anything from an alpha king? But shouting, rank wouldn't help. "Not here. I'm looking for someone." A she-wolf. Dark blonde hair. Sea glass eyes. Lot of she-wolves in Ashwick. This one has a 5-year-old son. The rogue's eyes narrowed fractionally. So he knew Lyanna, knew Rylan, was protecting them from Aldrich. The realization stung worse than it should have. Where is she? The rogue shifted his weight. Subtle. But combat ready. Depends on your intentions. That's none of your. She's under my protection. which makes it very much my concern. 3 more wolves emerged from side streets, all rogue, all armed, all positioned to cut off escape routes. Gareth swore under his breath. The guards drew swords. Aldrich raised one hand, stopping them. This wouldn't be won with violence. And honestly, he deserved every bit of this resistance. I'm not here to hurt her. The gray-eyed rogue tilted his head. You already did. Truth. Undeniable. Aldrich dismounted, slow, non-threatening, held the rogue's gaze. You're right. I did. And I can't undo that. But I just learned something that changes everything. What would that be? My son is alive, and Lyanna found him. I need to see them. The rogue's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. You cast her out. Publicly. Told your entire pack she'd failed you. Each word landed like a blow. Aldrich absorbed them. I know. You let her believe her children were dead for 5 years. I didn't know. Doesn't matter. She carried that grief. While you moved on, while you found someone else, Aldrich's claws extended, not in threat, in pain, because the rogue was right. About all of it, I can't change what I did. But I can try to make it right. Some things can't be made right. Some breaks don't heal. The rogue stepped closer, close enough that Aldrich could see the old scars on his throat. The newer ones along his jaw, closest enough to be a threat, or a warning. You want to see them? You ask permission. Hers, not mine, not anyone else's. He pointed north. Little stone house, ash trees out front. She's there. Then he stepped aside, but his eyes held a promise. If you hurt her again, Sterling law won't save you. Aldrich understood, respected it, even. He remounted, rode north with Gareth, left the guards behind at the rogue's insistence. 2 against however many rogues lurked in Ashwick's shadows wasn't odds Aldrich liked. But he wasn't here to fight. He was here to, what? Apologize, explain, claim his son? Aldrich didn't know, only knew he had to see them. Had to know if anything could be salvaged from the wreckage he'd created. The house appeared exactly as the rogue described. Stone walls, ash trees, garden with a wooden fence. Aldrich dismounted, approached on foot. Gareth stayed with the horses, giving him privacy. The front door stood open. Aldrich saw movement inside. A woman's figure, blonde hair catching the late sunlight. His breath stopped. Lyanna, 6 weeks since he'd seen her. 6 weeks since she'd run from the palace, and he'd chased her through Ravenwood Forest. Like she was criminal instead of victim. She looked different. Thinner. Harder, but also more alive than he'd seen her in years. Aldrich stepped to the gate. Lyanna must have heard him. She turned, their eyes met. And every apology Aldrich had rehearsed died in his throat, because Lyanna's expression held no surprise, no relief, just cold, furious, absolute certainty. She stepped out of the house. A small boy followed, dark hair, thin frame, sea-glass eyes identical to Lyanna's. Aldrich's heart shattered and reassembled in the same moment. His son, alive, real, perfect. Rylan looked at Aldrich with the unguarded curiosity of a child who didn't understand the weight of this moment. But Lyanna did. She placed herself between Aldrich and Rylan, deliberately, protectively. Her voice cut across the space between them. You're not welcome here. Aldrich stood at the gate, frozen, not by fear, by the wreckage of 6 years collapsing around him, because his son, stood 10 feet away. And Lyanna looked at him like he was the enemy, which, fair. He'd earned that, every bit of it. Aldrich's throat worked. Finding words felt impossible. But he tried, Lyanna. I didn't know. Her eyes went colder, sharper. Didn't know what? That your elder Thorn stole our child? That Maris lied to me? That I spent 5 years grieving while you... She stopped, visibly reined herself in, glanced down at Rylan, softened fractionally. Not here. Not in front of him. Rylan looked between them, confusion creeping into his small face. Aldrich's chest cracked wider, first time seeing his son. And already he was causing damage. Can we talk? Please. The word tasted foreign. When had he last asked permission for anything? Lyanna's jaw tightened. She turned to Rylan. "Sweetheart, go inside with Alara." "I'll be there soon," Rylan's brow furrowed. "But Mama," now Rylan, her tone left no room for argument. The boy cast one last curious look at Aldrich, then obeyed, disappeared into the house, leaving Lyanna and Aldrich alone. 6 weeks of silence between them, 5 years of lies underneath. Lyanna crossed her arms. "Talk." Aldrich stepped closer to the fence. "Not over it." Giving her space control, I went to Maris. She told me everything. About the twins, about Thorn's order, about the protocols my father established. Lyanna's expression didn't shift. "And you believed her?" "Just like that?" Gareth found the evidence first. Inconsistencies in the birth records, payments I couldn't account for. I needed to hear it from Maris directly. How noble. The sarcasm cut deep. Aldrich absorbed it. "You have every right to hate me. I don't need your permission for that." God, she'd changed. The Lyanna he'd married would have held her anger behind diplomatic courtesy. This Lyanna wielded it like a weapon. And he deserved every strike. "I cast you out. I humiliated you. I let you believe our children were dead." Saying it out loud made it worse somehow. Made the magnitude of his failure inescapable. "I can't undo any of that. But I can bring you home. Restore your title. Prosecute Thorn. Give Rylan his birthright." Lyanna laughed, actually laughed. The sound held no humor. Just bitter recognition. "You think that's what I want? The title? The palace? It's yours by right." "I don't want rights. I want my son. Safe. Away from politics and bloodline protocols and elders who think children are pawns." She stepped closer to the fence. Eyes blazing. "You took 6 years from me, Aldrich. 6 years I could have spent raising him, loving him, being his mother." Her voice cracked on the last word. She swallowed hard, forced it steady. "You don't get to fix that with a crown." Aldrich's hands curled into fists. Not in anger, in helplessness. Because she was right, there was no fixing this. No grand gesture that would erase 5 years of grief. But he had to try. "Then what do you want?" The question came out raw, stripped of every defense. Lyanna studied him. Long, assessing then. "I want you to leave." The words hit like a physical blow. Aldrich's wolf howled inside his chest. No, this was his mate. His son. He couldn't just walk away. Except, he'd already walked away from Lyanna 6 weeks ago. And she'd survived, built a new life, found their child, became stronger in his absence than she'd ever been under his rule. Aldrich looked past her. At the small house, the garden, the simple life Lyanna had carved out, then back at her face, saw the determination there, the absolute unwillingness to compromise, and realized something that shattered him further. She didn't need him anymore. Maybe never had. "If I leave now, will you disappear?" His voice came out quieter than intended. Vulnerable. Lyanna's expression flickered. Something almost like pity. "I don't know. Honest." Which hurt worse than a lie would have. Aldrich nodded slowly. "I'll go. But I'm not giving up. On you. On Rylan. On making this right. There is no making this right. Then on trying." "I'm not giving up on trying." Lyanna said nothing. Just watched him. Aldrich forced himself to turn, walk back to where Gareth waited with the horses. Every step felt like tearing out pieces of himself. At the last moment, he looked back. Lyanna still stood at the fence. Rylan had appeared in the doorway behind her, watching. Father and son's eyes met. Rylan's held curiosity. Confusion, not recognition, not love, nothing. Because to Rylan, Aldrich was just a stranger. The realization cut deeper than anything Lyanna had said. Aldrich mounted his horse, rode away from the little stone house, away from his family, for the second time in 6 weeks. Except this time, he understood what he was losing. 3 days passed. Aldrich didn't return. But Lyanna felt him anyway, in the way Ashwick's atmosphere shifted. Rogues who'd ignored her before now nodded respectfully. The market vendors gave her better prices. Word had spread the Alpha King had come for someone, and that someone was the quiet she-wolf with a pup. Lyanna hated it, hated being noticed. Disgust, hated that Aldrich's presence had marked her even in his absence. On the fourth day, Gareth arrived, alone, unarmed, riding a single horse with saddlebags that looked heavy. He found Lyanna at the market, approached with hands visible. Non-threatening Lady Lyanna, still using the title, Lyanna set down the apples she'd been examining. "Gareth, may I speak with you?" Privately? She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she had nothing to say to anyone from Sterling Pack. But Gareth had helped her escape, had given her the means to survive. That earned him 5 minutes. "There's a clearing east of the market. Follow me." She led him away from curious ears, to a small grove where Rylan sometimes played in Blee now. Lyanna crossed her arms. "Say what you came to say." Gareth dismounted, pulled something from his saddlebags, a folder, the same one he'd shown Aldrich. "These are the records. Everything that proves Thorn's involvement, Maris's testimony, the payment trails, all of it." He held it out. Lyanna stared at the folder. "Didn't take it. Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you deserve to know the full extent of what was done to you, and because if you decide to pursue justice, you'll need evidence." Justice. What a concept. As if anything could balance the scales of 5 stolen years. Lyanna took the folder anyway, opened it. Read. Each page made her colder, harder, more certain that the Sterling Pack she'd loved had never actually existed. Just power. Politics. Bloodlines. People were expendable, even Luna's, especially Luna's who failed to produce heirs on schedule. She closed the folder. Looked at Gareth. "Did you know?" "No. I swear on my honor as Beta. I didn't know." Lyanna believed him. Gareth was many things, but dishonest wasn't one of them. "Does Aldrich plan to prosecute Thorn?" "He's already initiated proceedings. Council vote scheduled for next week." Fast. Aldrich must have pushed hard. Or maybe the evidence was so damning that even the council couldn't ignore it. Either way, it didn't change what mattered. "I'm not coming back." Gareth's expression didn't change. Like he'd expected this, Aldrich hoped. I don't care what Aldrich hoped. I'm not returning to Sterling Palace. Not as Luna. Not as anything. And Rylan? There it was, the real question, the heir issue. Lyanna's hands tightened on the folder. "Rylan is my son, not Sterling property, not a bloodline continuation. Mine, Pack Law says." Pack Law said I could be discarded publicly because my womb didn't cooperate on say schedule. Pack Law said my children could be stolen and I could be lied to for 5 years. So forgive me if I don't give a damn what Pack Law says now. The words came out sharp. Bitter true. Gareth absorbed them without flinching, I understand. But you should know, Thorn has allies. If Aldrich moves against him, there could be retaliation. Against whom? Against anyone Thorn perceives as a threat. Including you. Including Rylan. Ice flooded Lyanna's veins. Aldrich would allow that? Aldrich can't control what Thorn does before he's formally charged. The vote isn't until next week. That's 6 days for Thorn to make moves. Lyanna's wolf snarled. Of course Thorn wouldn't go quietly. Men like him never did. What kind of moves? Gareth's jaw tightened. The kind where witnesses disappear, where evidence vanishes, where problems get solved permanently. Problems, meaning her, meaning Rylan, the living proof of Thorn's crimes. Lyanna's mind raced. She'd been stupid to think Ashwick was safe. Stupid to believe she could hide here indefinitely. Thorn had resources, connections, decades of accumulated favors. If he wanted Lyanna and Rylan gone, border settlement independence wouldn't stop him. You're telling me this, why? Gareth pulled another item from the saddlebags, a sealed letter. Aldrich's personal seal, in silver wax. Because Aldrich asked me to deliver this. And to offer you protection if you want it. Lyanna stared at the letter, wanted to refuse it. wanted to burn it unread. But pragmatism won over pride. She broke the seal, read Aldrich's handwriting. Surprisingly neat. Lyanna, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm asking anyway. Come back to Stirling Palace. Not as Luna, as my guest. Under full pack protection, Thorn will move against you. Can't stop him from trying, but I can make sure he fails. Bring Rylan. Let me meet him properly. Let me try to be what I should have been from the beginning. A father, a mate, a man worthy of the family he destroyed. You owe me nothing. I know that. But please, give me the chance to protect you both. Aldrich Lyanna read it twice, then looked at Gareth. He actually thinks I'd trust him with our safety? He's desperate, and he means what he wrote, meaning it doesn't make him competent. He didn't protect me before. He didn't know he needed to. Ignorance isn't innocence, Gareth. The beta inclined his head. Fair. But ignorance can be corrected. Aldrich knows the stakes now. He won't fail twice. Lyanna wanted to believe that. Wanted to think Aldrich had learned. Changed. Become someone reliable. But 6 years of marriage had taught her otherwise. Aldrich was passionate, intense, committed, until something more important demanded his attention. Then he forgot promises, forgot people, forgot her. And she couldn't risk Rylan on the hope that this time would be different. She told Chaol that night, found him at the Copper's Rest, nursing ale in a dark corner. Sat across from him without invitation. Gareth came, warned me Thorn might retaliate. Chaol set down his mug. Expected. Lyanna pushed the folder across the table. This is evidence against Thorn. Everything. Chaol opened the folder, scanned the contents. His expression darkened with each page. Finally, this is damning. Thorn will burn for this. If it reaches trial, you think he'll move first? I think powerful men don't go down easy. Chaol closed the folder, slid it back. So what's your play? Lyanna took a breath. Aldrich offered protection. Wants me to come back to Stirling Palace. Chaol's eyebrows rose. And I don't trust him. Smart, but I don't have better options. If Thorn sends people here, Ashwick can't protect us. Chaol leaned back, studied her. There's a third option, which is, you go back. But not alone, not defenseless. He tapped the table. I know 12 rogue alphas, good fighters, no pack loyalty. If I vouch for you, they'll come to Stirling Palace as your personal guard. Aldrich wants to protect you? Fine, but you bring your own insurance. Lyanna's pulse quickened. Would they do that? For the right price? And the chance to see a corrupt elder burn? Yeah, they'd do it. It was audacious, walking into Stirling Palace with a dozen rogue alphas. But it also made sense. Aldrich couldn't betray her if she had independent protection. Thorn couldn't touch her if she was surrounded by wolves who answered to no one but her. How long to gather them? 2 days. Maybe 3. Lyanna nodded slowly. Do it. Except Thorn moved faster than either of them expected. That night, Lyanna returned to Alara's house, put Rylan to bed, sat by the window. Watching the street, Chaol had promised to keep watch, but the attack came from a direction no one anticipated. Through the roof, Lyanna heard the thatched tier, looked up. A wolf dropped through, black-furred, eyes yellow, Thorn's colors on a collar around its neck. Lyanna shifted mid-lunge, threw herself toward Rylan's room. The assassin was faster, caught her by the hindquarters, teeth sinking deep. Lyanna yelped, twisted, snapped at the wolf's face. It released, circled. Then 2 more dropped through the hole in the roof, 3 against 1. Lyanna backed toward Rylan's door, snarling, bleeding. This was how it ended, except the front door exploded inward. Chaol in full wolf form, massive, gray and silver. He didn't hesitate, launched at the nearest assassin, tore out its throat in one brutal motion. The other 2 turned on him. Lyanna shifted back to human, grabbed Rylan from his bed. Mama, what's happening? Shh. Stay quiet. She clutched him against her chest. Backed into the corner, Chaol fought like something feral. all teeth and claws and rage. He dropped the second assassin. But the third got its jaws around his shoulder. Cale roared, shook it off, then Aldrich burst through the door, in wolf form, silver and black, followed by Gareth and 4 sterling warriors. The third assassin tried to run. Aldrich caught it mid-leap, snapped its spine. The room fell silent, except for Ryland's whimpering against Lyanna's shoulder, and her own ragged breathing. Aldrich shifted back to human, blood on his mouth, eyes wild. He looked at Lyanna, then at Ryland. "Are you hurt?" Lyanna shook her head. Unable to speak, Cale shifted back, clutching his wounded shoulder. Thorn's people. 3 of them. Aldrich's expression went absolutely cold. "Gareth, get them out of here now." "Where?" "Stirling Palace. Full guard. No one gets near them." He looked at Lyanna. "I know you don't want to go. I know you don't trust me. But this house just proved it's not safe." "Please." Lyanna looked at the 3 dead wolves, at the hole in the roof, at Ryland trembling in her arms, at Cale bleeding but alive, then back at Aldrich. "We go. But Cale comes too. And any rogues he vouches for." Aldrich didn't hesitate. "Done." They arrived at Stirling Palace 3 days later. Lyanna riding with Ryland sleeping against her chest, Cale at her side, 12 rogue alphas flanking, and Aldrich leading them all through the gates. The palace guards stared. Rogues didn't enter Stirling Palace, certainly not armed, certainly not as honored guests, but Aldrich had given the order. And no one questioned the Alpha King. The courtyard filled with onlookers, pack members drawn by the spectacle. Lyanna dismounted, handed Ryland to Cale, walked forward, met Aldrich in the center of the courtyard. "I'm here for one reason, to testify against Thorn. After that, we're done." Aldrich's throat worked. "Understood. I'll need separate quarters. Security for Ryland. And your word that you won't interfere, you have it. Your word means nothing to me anymore, Aldrich. But I'll take it anyway. Because I have no choice." The words landed like blows. Aldrich absorbed each one. "I'll earn back your trust." Lyanna looked at him, really looked at the man she'd loved, the man who'd broken her, the man who now stood before her asking for something he didn't deserve. And she felt nothing, no love, no hate. Just exhaustion. You can't earn back what you never valued in the first place. Then she walked past him, into the palace Ruridity to face whatever came next. The trial convened 2 days later. Every elder, every noble, every wolf of rank, the great hall packed to capacity. Lyanna sat at the witness table. Ryland stayed in protected chambers with Cale's rogues, Soph. For now, Elder Thorn stood before the council. Defiant, unrepentant, "I acted for the good of the pack. Bloodline purity demands. You stole a child." Lyanna's voice cut through his speech. The hall went silent. She stood. "You took my son, told me he was dead. Let me grieve for 5 years while you played political games." Thorn's jaw tightened. The protocols are corruption dressed as tradition." Lyanna walked forward, every eye in the hall on her. "You didn't protect the bloodline. You poisoned it. You made this pack a place where children are pawns and lunas are disposable." She turned to the council. "If you uphold this, if you let Thorn walk free, then Stirling Pack deserves to fall." Silence. Then Gareth stood, presented the evidence, the payment trails, Maris's testimony, the forged documents. One by one, the council members reviewed the proof. One by one, their expressions darkened. Finally, the head elder stood. "Elder Thorn, you are hereby stripped of rank, exiled from Stirling lands." Effective immediately, Thorn's face went white. "You can't. We can. And we have." Guards seized him, dragged him from the hall. He fought, screamed, threatened, but it didn't matter. He was finished. Lyanna watched him go. Felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just done. 3 months later, Lyanna stood in the gardens of Stirling Palace, watching Ryland play with other pups his age, logging, running, free. She'd negotiated terms with Aldrich. She wasn't Luna. She was pack advocate, representing the interests of those without power, ensuring no one else got discarded like she had. It gave her purpose, and kept her away from Aldrich most days, which suited them both. He was trying. She'd give him that. Every week he asked permission to spend time with Rylan, teaching him to ride, to fight, to be alpha. Rylan was warming to him. Slowly, "Father taught me to shoot today." Father, not the man. Progress. Aldrich appeared at the garden gate, hesitant, like he wasn't sure he was allowed. Lyanna nodded once. He approached. "Rylan's doing well. He is, because of you." Lyanna said nothing. Aldrich stood beside her. Not too close, respecting her space. "I know you'll never forgive me." Lyanna turned, looked at him fully. "No, I won't." Aldrich absorbed that. "But maybe, someday, we can build something new. Not what we had, but something honest." Lyanna considered. The man before her was different from the one who'd cast her out, humbled, aware, still flawed, but trying, maybe. Someday, she turned back to watch Rylan. "But not today." Aldrich nodded. "Not today." He walked away, left Lyanna in the garden with her son, with her new purpose, with the knowledge that some breaks don't heal. But some fights are worth having anyway. And sometimes, surviving is victory enough.